Good morning. My name is Berdensey, and I am the Handbell Director of the Hockanum Valley Ringers in Vernon, Connecticut. It is an honor to be the handbell clinician for the United Church of Christ's Musicians Association National Seminar entitled A Brave New World. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we could not meet in person for this wonderful event. As our country slowly reopens, I would like to extend my gratitude to all the healthcare providers, the doctors, nurses, first responders, and of course, the essential workers. I'd like to thank everyone associated with organizing this event, especially Leanne Connolly, who worked hard to make this possible. Even though the Hockanum Valley Ringers have not rung in almost a year and a half, I would like to extend my gratitude to Pastor Tim Oslovich of Trinity Lutheran Church in Vernon, Connecticut, for allowing the Hockanum Valley Ringers to use their facilities and handbells for our rehearsals. Would also like to thank Peter Bax, principal of Groton Middle School, for allowing me to use our band room to take this session. Since this was going to be a virtual workshop, that I would go back to some basics of ringing handbells and speaking about the different techniques or articulations that are involved in handbells that you will find located on the last slide. The first one is Healthy Ringing by Susan Berry. Wonderful tips for handbells and hand chimes. It deals with warm-up exercise, proper techniques, a must-have for every director and ringer. The second book is the Handbell and Notation Guide, which goes through the difficulty level system, solo, and ensemble notation. And another invaluable resource is Handbell Techniques with Michelle Sherrick. Talk about the proper stance. Proper posture and body alignment are very important for healthy ringing. Learning to shift your weight is also important when performing handbells. Many people advocate standing straight with your feet evenly spaced, shoulder width apart. When you bend over to pick up a bell, however, care must be taken not to place undue stress on your lower back. Michelle Sherrick advocates a checkmark stance. The weight of the bell is now supported by your quadriceps, which are the front of your thighs. So it doesn't make a difference which foot is in front of the other. Your knees remain flexible. And Michelle states that we should think of the large muscles for support and the small muscles for control. So now, if I move forward to pick up the bell, I remain straight. I shift my weight forward and then back. So I forward to pick it up and back. This is especially important when we go to lift larger bells, like the C3. I have my right foot in front of my left. I'm going to shift my weight forward, lift the bell, and shift my weight back. So I'm not putting any undue stress on my arm or my back. All the stress is on my legs using my quadriceps. Next, let's talk about the basic grip or the proper grip. Originally, ringers were told to pick up a bell and to use your wrist to produce the sound. As you can see, my wrist is doing all the work. That puts undue stress on the wrist and later on can affect your whole forearm. Instead, Michelle Sherrick advocates picking up the bell with your thumb and forefinger. This is known as the fulcrum, the point that controls the bell. Your other fingers, notice, are out in the open right now. If I turn sideways, you can see this better. So instead of gripping or grabbing the bell, we want to seat the bell. So the bell is seated against my hand. And if you notice, there's a space between the handle of the bell and the fleshy parts of my hand. and I'm securely holding the bell at the same time. Now, if I were to close the bell using my other fingers, notice that the fleshy part becomes a backboard. My forearm is parallel to the ground, and the bell is vertical facing up. When you play a note, there are three parts to that note. The first part is the tack, or the beginning of a note. The second part is the duration, or the sustain of the note. And lastly is the ending of the note, the damp, or what we refer to in music as the decay. To initiate and prepare for the sound or the stroke, assume the proper stance. Lean the casting back and lower your arm to ring the bell. Again, start in this position, come down, we close that gap with the fingers. And sideways, it looks like this. Notice the bell is still vertical, forearm is parallel to the ground. After the ring, we do a follow through. So we come back up and around. So we put it together and down. So we talked about the initiation of the sound, the attack, the sustain, and then the decay and the damp. If you take a look at the bell, if you take a look at a bigger bell, if you think of it as the top edge being the lip, we have the waist and then the shoulder of the bell. This is important when talking about the damp. The size of the bell will determine how it is damped against your body. If I am ringing the G6, all I need to do is to touch the lip of the bell to stop the sound and dampen it. Now, B4, C5, higher, the lip of the bell in the casting will be used to damp the sound. If I just touch the lip, you will hear this, where some overtones continue to sound out. If I add the lip and the waist, part of the casting, then it stops. For bigger bells, like the C3, we're going to use the lip, all of the casting, and the shoulder. Now, sometimes we may need to assist with the opposite hand. A lot of bass bell ringers ring and then damp on the stomach area. The problem with that is you get that sound at the end. It's not a clean cutoff. If you're playing a piece of music that's very legato and slow, there's a technique that I personally like to use to damp the bell that sounds more like a diminuendo. In this case, I ring the bell, and then I gently, starting from the bottom up, roll the bell up. So it doesn't go into the next chord, but just blends in nicely. Again, starting at the shoulder, working my way up the casting, and I get a nice diminuendo-like damp. For chimes, ring, and then bring it across your chest. A lot of ringers ring and then turn their wrist into their chest. You can do the same thing without going completely across, without breaking your wrist. Same thing for a larger chime. In the lower chime, the C3, there are a few options. You can ring, bring it across the chest. But the problem is the clapper is right here. Another thing you can do is with your hand, down. Or I may use the table and stop it that way. Next I'll move to the different techniques, or what I call articulations. Ed Gordon put in great definition for articulations. And I am a wind player. I am a band director who plays saxophone. And I think the best definition comes from Ed Gordon, and that is simply, it's the way we speak on our instruments. So I don't really call them techniques. There's a technique in applying the different articulations when we play handbells. When we talk the sound of the bell, when we ring the bell, the sound comes from the casting, not the opening of the bell. And if you ring it, and then bring it closer to your ear, you can hear that sound emanating from the casting versus the opening. The echo is, if you look at the cymbal, it kind of looks like a fish hook. So when we ring the bell, we gently touch the lip to the table. And down. Now, if I were to turn the bell sideways, you can hear that echo better. Now, the bigger the bells, the more noticeable that echo is. Go to the C3. It's really noticeable. Now, you can't always turn the bell to the side based upon how much real estate you have on the table. Be very careful with bigger bells. And I am currently ringing with a group, and I'm ringing the bass bells. I haven't rung bass bells in years. But I'm fortunate enough to be able to perform for the Handbell Musicians of America seminar, which will be held in July in Arizona. And one of the pieces calls for an echo. And when I go to play, I cannot turn the bell to the side because of all the other bells that are on the table. So you see me do this. And it's a wonderful effect. And it will tell you when or which beats to do the echo. In the example, it shows a ring on beat 1, touch on 2, 3, and 4. Now, it may not always be on the downbeat. It may also be on the upbeat. The swing, three-step process. We pick up the bell, ring, step back and bring the arm back, and then step forward and move the arm forward again. So in the example, you ring on beat 1, step back for beat 2, and forward again on beat 3. And it will sound like this. The thumb dance, abbreviated by TD, is a stop sound. To perform a thumb dance, place your thumb on the casting and ring it like you normally would. It's a very short sound. When we move to bigger bells, if I just place my thumb on the casting, notice that there's a ringing afterwards. So if you bring two fingers up along with your thumb in the back, you get that stopped ring touch sound. Really wouldn't use a thumb damp for the big bells. Instead, it will be indicated to use a mallet instead. So depending upon the size of the bell will determine how far up casting you bring your fingers and how many fingers you use. Modulado comes from the Italian verb modulare, which means to hammer. It's not a hammer at all. Although I've seen some ringers try to hammer the bell into the table. And the mark isn't punching the foam like many people say. If you grab the bell, and no need to wrap your fingers completely around it. If you just put the bell down, until you get the desired sound. At first, you might not get anything. Keep doing it. Add a little more pressure until you get the sound that you want. If you want a drier sound, you can put your fingers on top of the bell. Say you have marks in a row on the same bell at a fast tempo. You notice you get that sound in between. That's more of a mark lift. And the mark lift is this. It's a normal mark, but then you immediately lift the bell, just producing the mark lift. I like to tell ringers, think of it as jumping on a trampoline. Come down on the trampoline, immediately back up. I see some ringers do this, and then lift the bell. It's all in motion. So how do we mark repeated pitches in a row? You can put the fingers back on top to avoid that mark lift in there. First of all, I want to talk about the grip of the mallet. When you grab the mallet, you grab it with your thumb and forefinger placed on either side of the mallet shaft. Again, this is called the fulcrum. Your other fingers wrap lightly around. Do not hold the mallet tightly. How much mallet should you have? Well, should be more than where your wrist is. If you're doing this, it's going to be very difficult to execute a roll. It's important also to choose the correct mallet for the correct range of bells. So if you can see, I have an array of mallets. For the upper bells, we have harder mallets. And then for the lower bells, we have mallets for those as well. Where do you strike the bell when using a mallet? Well, if you notice where the clapper hits the casting, the strike points, that's where you're going to hit with the mallets. On the opposite side, which is right here. And you can experiment by hitting in different places, finding that perfect spot that coincides with the strike points. How do you know if you should pick up the bell and mallet it, or if you should leave it on the table? Well, in the first example, the table mallet, you will see a plus sign with a dot underneath it, indicating that you hit with the bell on the table. If it's suspended, you see the plus sign. Some people hit on the back, some people hit on the side. My personal preference is the back, and say I have a whole note. After I make contact with the casting, I move the bell. So there's always motion with the bell. Will be, if it's on the table, a plus sign with a dot underneath and 3 slashes indicating the roll. Roll, you do not want to use your arms. You want flexibility in your wrists. And don't tighten up, not a tight grip. Produces a nice roll. To hear the different suspended mallets, this is on a G4. And as we move higher, I'm changing mallets. You don't have to hit hard at all. You would never use the mallet for the higher bells on the lower bells, because you could damage them. It's used on bells larger than C6, because it's difficult to get your fingers in the smaller bells. And it's a one-handed technique. And what you do is your thumb goes on top of the clapper in the middle, and then your forefinger and middle fingers go underneath the clapper, and you throw it down. Your thumb must leave the clapper. If it doesn't, you hear this. So it must come away from the clapper. Now, some people say, well, my bells roll when I do it. And I see many versions of the technique people do to play a pluck. I see them bring the handles close to the body so they can lean on it, so the bells don't move. But if you do it properly and lift the clapper straight up, they won't roll. The roll comes from when you go to lift it, you turn the bell, thus it rolls that way. Or the opposite happens. When you go to throw it down, you turn that way. And then that's what you want to avoid. That's why I did it gently. Just like we had the mark and mark lift, we have the pluck and pluck lift. In that case, for the pluck lift, you grab the clapper in the same manner. You put your hand, your opposite hand, on the handle and bring it up. Again. Now, if you're moving at a fast tempo and you have repeated plucks, you can use the thumb. But usually you won't have to do that. The C3, same technique involved in executing one bell. The shake is just a back and forth rapid movement. Again, be flexible. Do not use the arm. It becomes very tense. For the lower bells, the shake is marked with an SK, or it might have SK and a squiggly line. The gyro is not my favorite at all. I'm not so sure what purpose it serves other than maybe great optics when you're ringing. And I see many variations of the gyro. I see people who gyro above their head. You have to be very careful with the gyro that you're not using the wrist. And I see a lot of this, which is very dangerous. Think of using the arm. I see this happening. Like a hold down maybe? I'm not sure. Don't do that. The spiral gyro goes up. Now I'd like to talk about the vibrato. As with all instruments, a vibrato enhances the sound of a note. In handbell ringing, you ring the bell and then rock it back and forth from left to right. On the chime, you place your hand underneath the name plates and then bring your forefinger up where the slit of the tines are located and move it rapidly back and forth. Next technique is the let vibrates, indicated by an LV. Think of it as a sustain pedal on a piano. And along the way, you have to stop the LV at some point. Usually it's done with notes of a chord, and people come in at different times within the measure to sustain those notes. So if I'm ringing, say, C and E, and there's an indication for the C to start on 1 and the E on beat 2, and let continue throughout the measure, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's one of the times it's used. How do you know when to dampen the sound? Well, there are different indications. When you see a new LV, you have to damp the previous one. If you see an R in the music, which indicates you to ring, or you will see the damp symbol. And if you refer to the slide that contains that technique, you will see it looks like a bullseye. Now there's also something called a selective damp. So if you look at the first measure of the example I gave you, on the end of 2, you will see a selective damp on the F and A. And you will damp those 2 notes on beat 3. So it's very important to look at the music and to know when to stop the vibrate from occurring. The ring touch, it is a short sounding note that is rung close to your body and then immediately stopped. So if I ring this note, notice I'm not ringing out here, close to the body. A ring touch, contrary to belief, when I first learned how to do a ring touch, someone says, no pain, no gain. If it doesn't hurt, you're not doing it properly. If it hurts, anytime you ring and it hurts, that means you're doing something wrong. It can be done on larger bells. However, it is quite difficult to do. And there's a piece of music that I think takes the E flat 3, and I have to quickly do it. I don't know why it was written, but it's not fun to do, especially at a fast tempo. So be very careful depending upon the size of the bells. The next technique, called the singing bell, is a wonderful technique to use in music. And it is taken from the Tibetan singing bowl. and it produces a wonderful ethereal effect to the music. One of the pieces that I love the most playing is Arnold Sherman's How Can I Keep From Singing, in which he employs this technique at the very beginning, where ringer starts with the singing bell, and then above it is the melodic phrase that is used in an LV fashion. It's just a beautiful, beautiful effect. It is performed by using a wooden dowel and rotated around the rim of the bell. Once the bell phonates, the rotation can be slowed down. So I have two types of dowels here. I have a plain wooden dowel, and then I have a wooden dowel that is, half of it is wrapped in a plastic coating. Now some people use this as a handle, but other people use it actually to start the singing bell. Singing bell can be started by ringing it, depending upon what the composer wants, or as in Arnold Sherman's case, he wants the composition to start off with a singing bell. If I take the plain wooden dowel and I rotate it around, I'm going to start quickly at first. Actually hit the bell. Getting used to the technique is very important. So I'm keeping even pressure on the bell. And you have to be careful, because if not, you can get a vibration. Let me see if I can do it and you can hear it. You hear that scrape in there. And it just takes practice not to get that scrape. There it is again there. So keep steady pressure. It's very important that if you have more than one ringer doing the singing bell, that everyone moves in the same direction. Now if I started using the other dowel, using the coated end, the sound starts quicker with this type of dowel. And this is the first time I'm using this type of dowel, too. I've always used the plain wooden ones. So like I said, you can start it without ringing, or it may indicate start the ring, immediately go into the singing bell. There's another way you can use the singing bell technique, and that is, there's a beautiful piece by Kathy Mopa-Bust entitled Remembrance. It starts slowly, moves into a faster section, and then comes back to the original slow tempo, about 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of the bells from bass up to the battery section have 4 or 5 tied together whole notes. And as we talked about the decay earlier, as you ring, the decay will naturally happen. So there's no way you can sustain for 4 or 5 measures of whole notes tied together. It's a great opportunity to use the singing bell technique to get that note to sustain a little longer. For the last segment, I'd like to introduce you to weaving. Realize that this is only an introduction. When I teach weaving, well, it's a session within itself. And unfortunately, because this is totally virtual, I can't want you to do the articulations I showed you earlier. It's very important that you be patient and practice those articulations. And same with weaving, because it takes a while to learn how to weave. The very first class I went to on weaving, I got nothing out of it. And going to different weaving workshops, I've come to the conclusion that the best method I've seen is by John Banke, an educator, Handbell clinician, director, a wonderful musician. And is the ability to play 3 to 4 bells in succession. And as the title implies, like weaving a basket going in and out, which I can't do by the way. So one of the things I want you to get used to doing is instead of doing the shoulder dam, practice a table dam. Start with a whole note. 2, 3, 4, dam. 2, dotted half. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, half notes. 1, 2, 3, quarter. 1, 2, eighth note. 4 and 1 and. Notice when I ring, I'm ringing close to the table so I can dam. If I'm ringing a whole note, that gives me time to do a circle and come down to the table. 2, 3, 4, dam. It is a good idea to practice this with your dominant hand and then with your non-dominant hands. And practice at different tempi and different note durations. In weaving, there's no correct hand for a specific bell. And in general, get used to that in handbell ringing. Because there are times when you might have to start with your left hand instead of your on the right bell instead of your right hand on the right bell. So there are no correct hands. In this first exercise, you're going to ring the right bell, shoulder damp it. Ring the left bell, table damp it. Re-ring the right, and then center. Thus it looks like this. Right bell, 2, 3, 4, left, 2, 3, 4, right bell, 2, 3, 4, center, 2, 3, 4, damp on the table. It's a good idea with all these exercises, start with your dominant and then move to your non-dominant. So the left starts, and the left is the only bell that shoulder dams. Left, 2, 3, right, 2, table damp it. Left, 2, 3, center, 2, 3, and table damp it. So you're damping right when you're ringing the other bell. That's the one bell change. The next exercise is called the center bell pass. I start with the right, ring the center, pass the bell to my right bell, re-ring it, so I can pick up the left bell in the left hand. I'll show that to you again. Right, center, pass the center bell, re-ring it, pick up the left bell, and the left hand, and table it. So everything is damp on the table. When you pass, we talked about the grip at the very beginning. It's seated in your hands. So when you pass it, make sure you come from underneath. If you're doing a basic grip, you're grabbing the bell, there's no way you're going to get your hand under there, and you risk dropping the bell. So your fingers are up, you come underneath, and pass the bell. Again, right bell, center bell with your left, pass it to your right hand, right, left bell, left hand. And notice I have a clean dam each time. Practice it with your opposite hand. Left, right, pass it, center, right. I think I said that wrong. So, that's okay. Watch again. Left bell, center bell, pass the center bell, re-ring, right bell. Now it's good to practice those at different speeds. Practice slowly at first. It takes time and patience. At least it did me. The weave. Once you've mastered those two exercises, you can do the weave. I'm just going to do it at first, and then I'll talk it through. Right bell, center bell, left bell. So the right bell is rung with the right hand. Center bell with the left hand. The left bell is being rung with the right hand. Now, a little note. Whichever hand is ringing the bell, that's the side you ring on. So I'm starting on the right, so I'm ringing to the right of the center bell. So I can pick this up. Now the center bell is in my left hand. So now I got a ring, since it is in my left hand, to the left of the bell I need. So I'm going to move my body and ring over here, so I can pick up the left bell with my right hand, and then I'm moving back to my right hand, moving to the right, so I can place the center bell back down. And then moving back to place that one down. I'll show it again. Right, move, center, move back, left bell. Okay? Right now I'm using gross motor movements. As you become more familiar with the weave, you can move faster. Positioning of your body is very important. Like I said, right hand, you're ringing to the right side. Left hand, you move to the left side so you can pick up the other bell. And then you move back. I am not using a full grip. I'm doing this. I get very bogged down in my motions. So I'm using the fulcrum. I've got the bell secure. Practice with your opposite hand. Starting with the left, I'm ringing to the left of the bell I'm going to. Right. Like I said, gross motor movements. I'm actually ringing out this way. When you first learn this, make sure you're not around other people. And try to ring straight up. Place the bell back in its original place. In closing, I want to thank you for inviting me to have this virtual workshop with you. And as I mentioned earlier, it's too bad we're not live, so we can practice these exercises and techniques and articulations together. I want to wish you a wonderful conference, and I am looking forward to this evening's concert. From Groton, Connecticut, I'm Lawrence Berdensey, representing the Hockanum Valley Ringers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Larry.
Hey,
Nice
Leanne,
job.
how are you?
Good. Oh, I have a question already.
Okay.
Why weren't you using gloves?
I usually do use the gloves, but since I was presenting, it was just easier for me to do that, especially if bass bells.
Yeah.
I will wear them because it will help me grip the bell better. And
Okay.
you always want to protect the finish. Some directors let their members ring without gloves, but they also clean their bells more often.
That's right. That's right. So a few questions I've gotten. Do you have any YouTube videos that show this kind of bell technique that you were explaining?
No, I do not. That was the first video I've made. And if you ever join my live presentation, it's not that dry. A lot of fun, actually. And to watch you do the different articulations is always fun. And I miss out doing all that with you.
Right. Do your ringers usually, when you get a new ringer into your group, do you audition them?
For my group, I do. I like to go through some basic techniques, watch them ring, listen to them play the different articulations so I know which level they're at. I think that's important. If you're in a church setting, I tend not to audition in a church setting because you want to involve the whole congregation as much as you can.
Right, right. So a couple of things that I have never heard of, and a couple of people commented on that as well. The gyro.
Yes.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, it's not employed too often. And like I said, it's the least of my favorite techniques. It's more of an optical. It does give some sort of, if you think of the swing, you kind of get that echo effect in there as well. But like I said, it's more of an optic and you rarely see it.
I cannot wait to see your group play.
Oh, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone this evening. Last night's session, listening to the different choral groups was amazing.
Very amazing.
Of course, looking forward to Paul Winter listening to
yes,
as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and so most of the techniques that you saw in the video are actually going to be used, minus the gyro, this evening. The LV is used a lot, and especially in Nocturnal Fantasy. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Remind us again, LV is
so you let it vibrate, like the sustain
let vibrate
on the piano.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm wondering, when you have a group of ringers, I know in our church we struggled with this problem. Who plays which bells? How do you decide and assign those bells?
I think as a director, you have to learn everything you can about your ringers. The age of the ringer as well. Like currently I mentioned, I will be performing in Arizona next week on bass bells. I've actually had an injury in between. So I had to get some cortisone shots because I haven't rung the bass bells in a while, and I've been practicing every day to keep up with it. So you got to make sure, first of all, your ringers are able to ring the bigger bells. They be more apt, maybe for the smaller bells, and through, if you get students, people who've been ringing for a while, then like I said, you get to know, as a teacher, I get to know my students. I get to know my ringers as well, what they're capable of doing. And if I can switch them and move them around, that's always helpful because they get to appreciate the different parts of the ensemble and can relate to music that way.
Great. Another question. How long has the Hockanum Valley Ringers been together, and how many ringers do you have?
Well, we had 13 ringers, and we're going to need some ringers because some people have moved. We
Okay.
have very happy to announce that 2 of our ringers are married and are expecting their second child. So that deals with that. So anyone out there in the Connecticut area, come be looking for some new ringers, come join us after hearing us this evening. So I took over in 2012, and
Okay.
it's been a blast. It really has been a great bunch of people. You meet new people along the way. And back to YouTube video, if you're in Connecticut and would love me to come and do a workshop, I would love to do that. I enjoy working with people and doing that. I saw a question about 4-in-hand in there along the way.
Yeah, I just saw that one. When 4-in-hand is used, I find it hard to always damp them clearly. Is it always necessary to damp them, or does the writing intend that to be the case?
No, you do have to damp, unless you have a special, like, once again, if you have an LV, you're not going to damp. I have to look at the technique of the 4-in-hand, and that's one of the things I wanted to cover, but it becomes quite lengthy, longer than time was allowed to do that. So getting used to the 4-in-hand and damping is tricky, and depending upon the part, you might have to damp one of those bells while the other bell rings. And so there are many different techniques you can use on that. But like I said, that's a whole another hour and a half by itself. Weaving is, that takes a good while to teach. But
Well, I'm interested in the 4-in-hand because our director uses 4 and directs at the same time, which is kind of an interesting little feat.
Yeah.
But it is curious how you're supposed to damp, and you know, the other one definitely rings.
Well, yeah. So depending upon how you have your 2 bells set up, you can ring them simultaneously, and that's called a Shelley ring, or you can ring them independently of one another. Which most people do, and you get used to doing the damp, which is in different ways of damping. But yeah, director ringing is very challenging, especially if you don't have enough ringers. You know, sometimes directors have to do that, and that becomes very difficult.
That was one of our next questions. How do you manage absences in your group? Missing a player is a problem.
Well, in the community group, especially my group, they know what my expectations are ahead of time. People do get sick, unfortunately, but they know that, you know, if it's a cough, that's show up. Well, nowadays we look at coughs differently, but you know, at a concert where one of my ringers wasn't feeling well, but she had to show up, and she realized that at the time. It felt so bad because if you only have 13 ringers, what are you to do? You can't always get a sub right away. That learns depending upon the difficulty of the music as well.
Let's see. I'm trying to decide if this is a question or a comment. If possible, have 1, 2, 3 backup ringers who cannot commit to the group, but who love to ring, who can step in, cover rehearsals.
Yeah, and that's a good comment. You know, in a church setting, I think, depending upon how big your program is, you might have more to choose from. In my group, because we're a bronze level group, it's difficult to find someone who can just and substitute. But we do have a couple here and there that we rely on, and they don't want to make the commitment to the group because it is a lot of work. A lot of times, especially around the Christmas season, we're doing 6 concerts in December. So it's nice to have those at my disposal, and the wonderful ringers, wonderful people. And if you can have that in your back pocket, I suggest you do that.
And one more thing here. We had talked about the gloves in the beginning. I think Peter wants to know to glove or not to glove.
Yeah, I suggest to glove.
What you said about that? Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a solo ringer, I know solo ringers don't like to use gloves because they can just pick up the bell easier. And especially if you're doing four in hand, if you're doing traveling four in hand, which is a technique within itself, it's important. Use the gloves. They're gloves with dots, without dots. You get the Velcro, which I like, which keeps them on. Like I said, the base ones, I order leather gloves so I can grip those bells, and gives me the strength
Okay.
to do that.
Okay. And there's also a PowerPoint of the information in your
Yes,
resources down below, right?
I submitted that. I'm assuming it's there.
I think I saw that this morning. Yes.
Okay, good.
So anybody who wants to can check that.
Yep.
And for the person, I think, who wrote in about your a YouTube
Mhm,
video of such, I think they might be out of Connecticut.
mhm.
So can they contact you if
Sure.
they have questions about that?
HVR ringers and it's on my sheet too. At Gmail.
Right. The Hockanum Valley Ringers website, and that will go to you.
I travel as long as they feed me. You know, I'm easy.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, Larry. That was just
Oh.
wonderful. I'm so excited to hear the bell ringers.
Yeah.
And if anybody ever gets a chance to see them in person, are you scheduling any concerts already?
Because we're not even back in the church yet.
Yeah.
In the process of hopefully getting back in and restarting up again. So
Okay.
our website is currently down, and we're trying to fix that. It was hoping to be done by today.
Okay.
And we post things on there. If you send an email to us and want to get on our email mailing list, we notify people when it comes time for concerts and send out a mass email.
Great.
And if they don't have email and like snail mail, get in touch with us. We'll send you a letter as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Larry.
Well, thank you
It's been
all.
great
And
seeing you.
it's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Yep.
And the next workshop will be coming soon in about 1 minute from
All right, thank
Angela. Bye.
Bye-bye.